Luigi Mangione.
Luigi Mangione.
Luigi Mangione.
Glamorization of this guy. What's he called? Luigi Mangione.
I don't think we need any more context, as some of you, your mothers, aunties, but also grannies are going crazy over this guy. You need to chill. But for my non-chronically online viewers who haven't followed what's been happening, Luigi Mangione is a 26-year-old from Maryland and a Penn graduate. He's at the center of an investigation into the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. The shooting happened in Manhattan on December 4th, 2024, where Thompson was ambushed and shot multiple times. Luigi is the primary suspect. He's been vocal about his dislike of big corporations, so that could be the motive. In fact, some people have investigated his Goodreads reviews and also read the manifesto that he left. And yeah, it's pretty clear he's an anti-capitalist. Eventually, Luigi was caught in Altoona in Pennsylvania after someone recognized him at a fast food restaurant. So that is the general context, but when I was searching online and looking at the commentary, I found multiple references to former outlaws, folk heroes like Robin Hood or Guy Fawkes. So I searched to see if there were other cases like this, and I struggled to find any examples in recent history. I mean, our Western societies are deeply unequal, and in some areas those inequalities are getting worse. So why have the rebels disappeared, and why do they reappear now? The obvious answer to that question would be to say that now we're more civilized, so we do activism differently. Back in the days though, we would get rid of CEOs on the public forum and we would invite people to, have fun and celebrate. Public punishment was meant to regulate crime in society. It had an educational, punitive, but also entertaining function. Big boss philosopher Michel Foucault wrote that public punishments, like executions, were supposed to show the state's power and scare people into obeying the law. But they didn't always work this way. Sometimes the crowd would start to feel sorry for the person being punished, especially if the punishment was deemed too harsh. Instead of being horrified by the crime, the audience would focus on the cruelty of the punishment. They would see the criminal as the victim of a system. Foucault says that this unintended reaction from the public is probably one of the reasons why public punishment faded away and was replaced by more individual, hidden and controlled forms of discipline, like the prison. Now, the fact that the audience started to side with the criminal doesn't mean that they chose immorality. Of course, they understood that crime was immoral. We're talking about people who were born and raised in the church, who grew up listening to moral speeches. So of course they wanted to behave in the most righteous way possible. What happened is that they considered what they learned and applied it to the world around them. So they looked at the people undergoing those cruel punishments and started to think, wait, why am I cheering this? Why do I feel empathy all of a sudden? Well, that is class consciousness. Now, in the meantime, thinkers and philosophers started challenging the way we understand the world. That period is remembered as the Enlightenment. They campaigned for equality, for the democratization of knowledge, for universal suffrage, for the abolition of slavery, for freedom of speech. I'm not denying that some of them, a lot of them, were problematic. And to be honest with you, a lot of their ideas were inspired by the barbarous cultures that the West was conquering at the time. So yeah, but that's a topic for another video. That rhetoric of barbaric versus civilized was used by Enlightenment philosophers to push for new reforms in all areas of society, including the way we deal with punishment. Among them, Jeremy Bentham thought it was time to fully privatize punishment. We can't pretend to be an enlightened species and cut people's heads off on public squares. That's why the prison became the primary mode of punishment. Reformists like Bentham believed that people aren't born criminal, people can change. So we should let them reflect on their wrongdoings and hope for the best. The problem was that the ideology of liberalism, Sir Bentham's ideology, isn't limited to the social stuff. Liberalism also deals with the way we run the economy. Liberals seek to achieve greater social equality in a way that does not upset the free market economy. So the development of prisons was determined by those economic constraints. Over the centuries, Western countries have let corporations get more and more involved in the prison system. So we're now far from Bentham's ideals of the prison as a reformist institution. And to be honest with you, he knew very well what he was doing. He created himself a super cost-efficient model of the prison called the panopticon, where you only need a few guards to check on inmates from a tower, And the inmates, on the other hand, can't tell if they are being watched, so they live in constant fear. The living conditions of inmates today are really bad, precisely because people followed Benson's trend and continued to produce more and more cost-efficient prisons. The brutal violence of public punishment is now incorporated in daily forms of violence like unpaid labor, a lack of access to healthcare, a lack of food, a lack of space, AI surveillance, and just generally speaking, the very tense atmosphere that all those things create. Taken individually, those different forms of violence don't seem too cruel. But when you put them all together, you start to see how inhumane it is. Sure, we have made a lot of progress and acquired a bunch of new rights. Thank you to the activists and revolutionaries who got us here. But what I'm talking about here is the deeply ingrained belief that we are the good ones, we are the civilized ones. And that belief prevents us from seeing all the harm that we cause at home and abroad. Our societies are still violent, but the violence isn't coming from a single institution, a single entity. It has been disseminated across various institutions, both private and public. I noticed that a lot of the discourse coming from liberal commentators tend to focus on the means and not the message. The argument is that there are other forms of protest that would be more effective. We hear this argument all the time. The spectrum of what acceptable activism is getting smaller and smaller. Elites have become even more demanding as we have developed this narrative of the civilized world versus the barbarous world. In the civilized world, we protest with lobbying, with polite emails, and peaceful demonstrations. Violence is completely unacceptable and cannot be legitimized. The problem is that the system is broken in many ways. People don't feel represented by their governments. Activists are fighting against powerful lobbyists, and protesting feels increasingly unsafe. In liberal democracies, there are a lot of implicit rules that officials are supposed to follow in order to avoid instability. For example, if a lot of people feel angry towards a specific problem like, I don't know, the healthcare system, just a random example. They can voice their concern to their representatives, they can protest, they can organize. If the movement is big enough, well, there is an expectation that the government is going to react and do something to go back to a more stable situation. It's a constant negotiation between the people and their government, and the government has the power to make the right decision. Contrary to what we often hear, a lot of people genuinely want to play according to liberal democracy's rules of conflict, negotiation, and resolution. But the game isn't fair. The rules only apply to one side, and the other side can get away with anything. So what can we do? I'm asking this to any person who believes that things have to change, but also believe that only peaceful protest is the way to go. I'm genuinely curious, and I'd love to change my mind on this. But yeah, what can we do? I condemn murder, obviously, but like my peasants' ancestors, I cannot help but develop a form of empathy towards the person who has done the morally wrong thing, because I cannot see their point, and I struggle to argue against it. Seeing the point doesn't make you a bad person. We treat many anti-establishment outlaws as folk heroes. That doesn't mean we celebrate the burning of the parliament like Guy Fawkes planned to do. That doesn't mean that we glorify stealing like Robin Hood would do, or beheading like the French revolutionaries did. We just get the point. So just to sum up, I think that we struggle to legitimize the actions of Luigi Mangione because we tend to look at ourselves as the civilized ones. We are a civilized society, which means that there are some rules of respectability we need to abide to. We must do politics in a respectable way. That means that we, the people, have to protest in a respectable way. But that also means that officials have to exert violence in a respectable way by disseminating it in both public and private institutions, one of them being United Healthcare. Okay, so now I want to talk about another reason why some groups of people are reluctant to legitimize the actions of Luigi Mangione. I feel like there is a competition between two moral grids. What do I mean by that? Well, according to sociologist Max Weber, our Western societies are built around what he called the Protestant ethic. Weber argued that the Protestant Reformation changed how people thought about work and wealth. Instead of seeing material success as something to avoid or a sign of greed, many Protestants, especially Calvinists, started seeing hard work, discipline, and success as signs of being in God's favor. This belief encouraged them to work hard and be frugal, linking economic success with spiritual virtue. Brian Thompson, the former CEO of United Healthcare, is said to have been quite successful at his job and has climbed the social ladder quite fast. According to Weber, that is why some people would see him as sort of morally superior and defend him. So that's one moral grid. Wealth is a sign of moral virtue. CEOs deserve our respect and admiration. But there is another moral grid, the one we talked about previously. You know, the wait, why do I feel empathy for Luigi? Or wait, why do I think the CEO deserved it? That moral grid is less rigid. It makes us question the Protestant ethic. It makes us hate the rich and develop class consciousness instead. We see both moral grids in corporate media at the moment. Class consciousness is competing against the Protestant capitalist ethic. What is interesting though is that an impressive amount of people have chosen class consciousness, and corporate elites are a bit scared. I mean, it's not surprising to me that health would be a motivator for class consciousness across the political spectrum. The experience of bodily exploitation is what led to the formation of unions, of many social movements like the feminist movement, the anti-racism movement, pretty much every social movement. Those negative bodily experiences tend to mobilize people and even radicalize them. Maybe because it's located, it's physical, it's real, it's a matter of life and death. So the goal now is to expand that class consciousness beyond health. People must choose that moral grid over the cult of wealthy people. That is it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. It was a little bit less structured than usual, a little bit less edited than usual, but I just wanted to get my thoughts across. Feel free to tell me what you think about the whole situation in the comment section. I'd love to hear your takes. As always, I would like to thank my patrons for their support, and a special thank to top tier patrons Wolfgratz, Sebastian, Gazi Chic, Patrick Button, Devish Mohan Mina, Jeff Lee, Yilan, Tayeb, Nick, Brandon, James, Ujwal, Pablo, Patrick, Boris, Ria, Ivan, Donaj, Alex, Toki, Koriji, Tristan, Jan, Manuel, Christopher, and Perry. And thank you to the other ones who prefer to stay anonymous. And yeah, that's it. I'll see you very soon. Salut!
Non, Alice, tu peux pas faire cette tête.
Si.
Non, tu peux
je fais
pas.
plein de trucs
Tu n'as
différents.
pas le droit de faire cette tête-là. Genre, Luigi qui va CEO et tu fais... C'est interdit. Non.
Chut, t'écris pas, meuf. T'as des voisins. On dit la meuf qui a gueulé pendant 1h30. Et tu en parlant de...
La meuf, là, ouais.